Mrs. Promise came back home one fateful evening from the office with a dismissal letter. She has been fired from office by a very close friend of her family. She came back and dropped the letter for her husband, accusing him of being in support of her dismissal. Because there's no way Mr. Henry, her husband's childhood friend, will fire her without the husband being aware. Mr. Promise went through the letter and became very surprised and upset. He was annoyed because his friend Mr. Henry did not show him respect by dismissing his wife without telling him what the problem was. He picked his phone and called Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry was expecting his call, though he had a plan of seeing him later that evening. He picked the call to explain what happened to his friend Mr. Promise, but Mr. Promise was highly upset. To give him time to explain, he made all effort to give a little explanation, but Mr. Promise wouldn't listen. Mr. Promise told him that he deserved to be notified about his actions before executing it, even if his wife did anything that will warrant her to be dismissed. All Mr. Henry's explanation was to no avail, and Mr. Promise asked him to come over to the house and see him after work. Later that evening, Mr. Promise was busy sweeping the parlor. It was true he swore never to do house chores, but he doesn't like to stay in a dirty environment. Mr. Promise was busy with the sweeping when his friend Mr. Henry entered. He stopped the sweeping at once to get mad at Mr. Henry. Immediately, Mr. Henry stopped him from talking and asked him a question. He asked him, "Are you supposed to be the one sweeping the house? Because I am sure your wife is home." Mr. Promise asked him if there was anything wrong in him sweeping the house. He asked him to wait and turned to the table to get the letter he gave to his wife. He brought the letter and asked him to explain to him why he should fire his wife without telling him what she did first as a close friend. Mr. Henry asked him to calm down, that he will explain everything to him, but let him sit down. When they sat down, Mr. Henry started. He told him about his wife's poor performance and her inability to meet the company owner's expectation. He told him that for some times now, he has been the person cleaning his office. His wife would come to work and leave everywhere unclean. He kept quiet for long, hoping that she would come back to her senses, but it got worse either. She would come to work and be sleeping every day. At first, he thought she was sick. Then he allowed her, but as the day went by, the situation kept going beyond his control. Mr. Henry called her attention in respect of that, but that made it worse. The annoying part was her phone calls. She spent hours every day answering long calls, abandoning her duty. She stopped making available the office needs like coffee and tea, stationeries and others. Even when Mr. Henry would give her signs to control herself, she would prefer her phone calls. He tried to manage it, but it was pulling the company down. The report got to the head office and her letter of dismissal was sent, and Mr. Henry was given a warning letter too for not reporting the situation when it all started. Mr. Henry sat down in his office thinking of how to issue the letter to her, thinking of how his friend Mr. Promise would feel, but in this case he has no option than to give her the letter. As Mr. Henry was explaining what happened to his friend, Mrs. Promise interrupted them with a phone call from her mother-in-law. She had reported her husband and his friend Mr. Henry to her mother-in-law, that they connived and took her job away from her. She put the phone on loudspeaker so that the mother-in-law could reach out to everyone and she could hear them too. After that, she dropped the phone at the center table and dragged it to the middle so that the discussion will start properly. She said, "Thank God Mr. Henry came and her husband is also home. These two people she reported are around." Mr. Henry started explaining to the mother what happened. She told her how lazy and careless Mrs. Promise has become. He told her how she has refused to attend to her duty in the office, which made the owner of the company to dismiss her and query him for condoning her. He also reported Mr. Promise as the one doing the house chores because he met him sweeping when he came. Mr. Promise, who never wanted to tell his mom, had to open up. He said that he has been the one doing almost all the house duty a woman should be doing. When he is not there to do them or to assist, things will not be done well. After that, the mother started talking to her daughter-in-law, Mrs. Promise. She told her that the reason her husband started doing the house chores in the first place was to show her love and to assist her. She told her that she taught her son, Mr. Promise, to always help his wife in domestic work whenever he is free. She said to her that taking such good and lovely gesture for granted will make her lose it and she will never get it back again. She told her her that to get a man that will do a domestic work like a houseboy, not minding his position as a man, is a blessing from God. It is an error to use it against such man. She told her instead of allowing herself to become lazy because her husband is helping her, she should draw strength from her husband's help to become a better woman. Most importantly, to always tell her husband how nice and better his domestic works are. After the mother-in-law's advice, she felt so sorry for what she did and went on her knees to beg her husband. Mr. Promise had to see his wife's tears. He had to carry her up immediately and ask her to cheer up. He told her to be the wife he wanted her to be, and he would be there for her at all time and in everything. He pleaded with his friend Mr. Henry to find a way to cancel the dismissal letter and restore his wife's job back to her. He assured him that his wife would change and meet up with the company's demand. Mr. Henry told him that bringing her back and she continued the way she was might cost him his own job. Mr. Promise assured Mr. Henry that his wife has learned her lessons and she will become better. Mr. Henry promised to do his best to bring her back to the office, and he left the house. This is a big lesson to so many ladies out there. Thank God we were able to put this message together to better our ladies. Please drop your comment, share this video so that our ladies will watch and become better. Please wait for another amazing episode coming up on Friday. Please help us to pass this information around by sharing this video. Follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And make sure you turn on the notification bell for you to get our videos each time we post new videos. See you next Friday. Thank you for your support.